I think the symbols that people use to express themselves or to try to capture some of their beliefs in are really significant and important, and the way that they're treated both by people within the community of people who use those symbols and by people outside of that community is really significant. When they're used or indeed abused by people inside or outside, it makes a huge difference. And I think the nature of the organisation or the nature of the community that holds those symbols has a great deal of bearing on it. I think if a symbol is held by an organisation that's perceived of as having power, and I'm talking about political, secular power here, if it's perceived of as having that kind of power, then its symbols then become legitimate targets for assault. If on the other hand the organisation, that community, is felt to hold less power or to be perhaps under attack or to be the subject of prejudice, then its symbols tend to be treated with much more respect and regard. I mean, the most obvious ones right now, I suppose, are Christian symbols. When the early Christian church was established in the early centuries, certainly early centuries after Christ, it was a persecuted organisation, a very small organisation, very small groups of people meeting in one another's cellars, and heavily persecuted. And I don't know an awful lot about the details of that history, but my understanding is that one of the symbols they used was this fish symbol, the one that you see on the back of cars sometimes, and that would be chalked, I guess, but marked outside of people's houses who were sympathetic to the teachings of Jesus Christ. And so that if you were a member of this oppressed minority, you could recognize a fellow member of that community, a fellow oppressed individual, by the symbol of the fish on the door outside. And so that symbol has all kinds of meanings, or had all kinds of meanings in those first couple of centuries. And if somebody was to attack that symbol, if some Philistine or some Roman or somebody from a pagan faith perhaps, or someone from the ruling elite was to attack that symbol, was to go around and scratch out all of the chalk marked fish from outside people's lintels or from outside the doors of people's houses, then literally attacked and defaced the symbol, or just made fun of it, in some way, and rendered it powerless, meant it didn't serve as a uniting symbol for an oppressed minority, then that would probably be looked on as a bad thing. I'm guessing we'd probably judge that in a negative way. I think it's interesting to contrast that with contemporary Christianity, which has its own symbols. It has the cross, the wafer, the little fish thing to a certain extent, and a bunch of other symbols. And because Christianity, and particularly a big faith in Christianity, like Roman Catholicism, is no longer seen as an oppressed minority, if it's seen as anything at all, it's seen as an oppressor. It's seen as a force not for good in the world, but as a source of oppression. It's seen as an organisation that hosts and protects abusers. It's seen as an organisation which has a history of burnings and book burnings and torture and torment. Because it's seen in that light, then its symbols function very differently. These are no longer the symbols of oppressors, we think. These are the symbols of dominance, of a ruling and powerful organisation. And when someone attacks the symbols of an organisation that is in power, it doesn't carry any of the pejorative overtones that attacking the symbols of an oppressed minority has. It's a good thing to attack the symbols of a domineering authority. It felt good, I believe, or at least it looked good, when the swastika that was at the top of the what's it called? The Reichstag? No. Top of the that building in Germany, I'm sorry it's completely gone, when that was blown up. It was good when that symbol was destroyed. It was good when the symbol of when some of the statues of Lenin were toppled, when the former Soviet Union was toppled. Those symbols were destroyed because they seemed to signify a domineering and overbearing and oppressive regime. And that seems to be the case. So destroying the symbols of power are different to destroying the symbols of oppression. Symbols used by the people in power as opposed to symbols used by the people who are oppressed. Sometimes it's not quite clear, I don't think, where the lines are with that. I mean, I don't really want to offend anybody here, but the attack that took place on 9/11 was, in addition to obviously killing an awful lot of people, over 3,000 people, was also a hugely important significant symbolic act. Clearly, it didn't have strategic value. The World Trade Center was not a regional head of government. It wasn't a communications hub for the military-industrial complex. It didn't affect any of the infrastructure significantly at all. And those 3,500 people that died were not military personnel. So the attack did not take out significant strategic targets. It wasn't an act of real warfare. It was an act of symbolic warfare, in which, from the attacker's point of view, the symbol of an oppressor was being attacked in as public and as visible a way as possible. Effectively, the two front teeth of an overbearing bully were being knocked out in a very public way. Yeah, I think these attacks on, obviously that's we see that differently. We on this side of the two front teeth see that differently. We see it as a different kind of attack. But I just think that the symbolism of crackers and the symbolism of fish and the symbolism of towers. And if you ever get a moment, by the way, just have a look at the tribute that was written by the Japanese architect who designed the Twin Towers. He wrote a really stirring passage about what he felt his ambition was for that tower, and if I can find it, I'll put it in the info box for this video, which rings slightly ironic given its ultimate fate. But yeah, attacks on symbols, symbolic warfare and symbolic assaults and symbolic acts of aggression. Even something as stealing a cracker or blowing up a swastika or something like that. They're enormously powerful acts, and whether you perceive the organisation to be an organisation of power, or whether you conceive that organisation to be one that is oppressed, or whether you just consider it to be irrelevant, that organisation is no more significant, it's neither oppressed nor powerful, it's just insignificant, no more important than a Star Wars convention. Those are going to affect how you interpret the acts of aggression against the symbols of that organisation. And I think we're seeing quite a bit of that on YouTube at the moment. Thanks very much.